Hi guys, time for another story. This story today, Mr. Nonsense. And Mr. Nonsense is, he's so funny. Let's read and find out. Mr. Nonsense had no sense at all. Not a scrap. Do you know, he doesn't live on the ground like normal people. No, he lives in a tree. Can you imagine? I mean, a tree house is nice to play in, but can you imagine having to climb a tree every day you want to go to bed? Why do you live in a tree? Mr. Happy asked him one day. Because I tried living on the ground, but that was too high up. So I moved to a tree to be closer to the ground. What nonsense, said Mr. Happy. Why, thank you, said Mr. Nonsense. Very strange little man. And do you know what Mr. Nonsense likes to eat? Porridge. Nothing wrong with that, I hear you say. But porridge on toast? No, thank you. Why do you like porridge on toast? Asked Mr. Nosy one day. Because I tried porridge sandwiches and I didn't like them, said Mr. Nonsense. I don't think I'd like them either. And do you know where Mr. Nonsense sleeps every night? In a rowing boat. In his bedroom. In his house. Up a tree. Silly Mr. Nonsense. Why do you sleep in a rowing boat? Asked Mr. Strong one day. Because, said Mr. Nonsense, I tried sleeping in a motorboat, but it was uncomfortable. Mr. Nonsense lives, as you could imagine, in a country called Nonsense Land. No, we met someone else who lived in Nonsense Land. Can anybody remember what they were called? That's right. Mr. Silly. Mr. Silly is very silly. Mr. Silly and Mr. Nonsense were friends, and they saw a lot of each other. Mr. Nonsense was often round at Mr. Silly's house playing jigsaw puzzles. They used to throw the pieces at each other. Hi, Silly. And Mr. Silly would go round to Mr. Nonsense's house to play cards. They would tear them up to see who could get the most pieces out of a card. What nonsense. However, this is a story about a time that it snowed in Nonsense Land. It doesn't snow very often, but one winter it did. Now, before we start, who can tell me what colour snow is? That's right, it's white. It makes everything white. Well, in Nonsense Land, the snow is yellow. Don't ask me why, but when it snows yellow snow. Imagine that. So instead of being lovely and white everywhere, it's yellow everywhere. So when Mr. Silly woke up one morning, the whole of Nonsense Land was covered. I say, he said, looking out his bedroom window. Snow. And he was so excited, he rushed round to Mr. Nonsense's house. Mr. Nonsense was asleep in his boat. Wake up, cried Mr. Silly. Wake up and come and look out the window. What on earth, grumbled Mr. Nonsense, rubbing the sleep out of his eyes as he got up and went across to the window. I say, he said, custard! Oh, it isn't custard, you silly banana, said Mr. Silly. It's snow. He rushed downstairs. Come on. And that day, Mr. Silly and Mr. Nonsense had one of the very best days of their whole lives. They had a snowball fight. Mr. Silly's snowball were round. Mr. Nonsense's were square, like a cube. they built a snowman. A very silly kind of snowman. His arms are a little bit skewy. Come on, said Mr. Nonsense that afternoon. Let's go tobogganing. Oh, but we don't have a toboggan, said Mr. Silly. No, we don't. Mr. Silly had a thought. Oh, yes, we do, he cried. What do you think they could use? Mr. Silly went back to Mr. Nonsense's house and came back with his bed. Whee! They said as they slid faster and faster even, down the hill in their rowing boat toboggan. It was a wonderful day. And that evening, after having supper together, porridge pie, Mr. Nonsense suggested that they play a game. What shall we play? Said Mr. Silly. Drafts, said Mr. Nonsense. I forgot how to play drafts. Oh, it's easy. You just go around and open all the windows. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you're staying safe. And remember, wash your hands.